Well, it's the final week of the election campaign. The public go to the polls this Saturday. Phil Goff, still the underdog in this year's election, and he joins us this morning on the line. Good morning to you, Phil.
Yeah, good morning, Wammo.
Still been unable to rattle the polls and chip away at National's lead. They're still, in most of the polls, polling over 50%. At this stage, it looks like they could govern alone. Do you expect that to narrow as we get towards the end of the week at all?
Oh, that's absolutely what we're setting out to do this week. This week is the critical week. We had our launch yesterday. Great rally, over 800 people, hugely enthusiastic. And I pointed out that the countdown is now started, and it's about whether or not at the end of this week, Kiwis want to sell off their assets, their power companies, their energy company, Air New Zealand, and for that matter, it'll be the whole lot. It'll be Kiwi Bank.
Is that the number one issue?
I think that's a critically clear issue about the difference between the two parties. If you sell the assets, if you go with National, you sell the assets, they're gone forever, we won't get them back, and with them are the dividend stream that they return to New Zealanders, which has been hundreds of millions of dollars every year. I mean, the fact is, when you're in a hole, you don't sell your very best assets. That's your ladder out of the hole. You keep your assets. But it's not the only issue. There are issues around jobs, and the particular thing that I'm concerned about is that we've got so many of our teenage kids out of work, 18 and 19-year-olds on the dole, going nowhere, wasting their time, a ticking time bomb. What we need to do is to get those young people, transfer that dole into apprenticeships, get people into training, give them a better future. It's about the cost of living. I think most New Zealanders will acknowledge that if you're low and middle income, the tax cuts didn't make up for the increasing cost of living and the GST going up. And that's why Labor's talking about, first $5,000 of income tax-free. Well, for most households, that's about $1,000 a year more in your pocket. A very good reason to vote Labor, to get some assistance to meet the rising cost of just about everything that you're buying.
Yeah, and of course you're going to be talking about some of these issues in the leaders' debates. There's two more leaders' debates, TV leaders' debates this week. Of course, John Key is going to pull out the phrase once more, show me the money. You've been asked by journalists over the past week or so about some of the figures, say with the returns from a capital gains tax. You've looked shaky on those numbers, Phil.
Well, no, the figures are very clear. Over 16 years, it makes $26 billion. It starts off in 2014-15 with about $78 million. It's because it's not, doesn't go retrospectively, but it builds up by I think it's 2015. We're close to $500 million, $500 million. By 2018, it's over $1 billion. And the thing about the capital gain tax is this. Not only is it fairer, because everybody pays a percentage of tax on whatever they earn, in this case 15%, but it enables us to pay off our debt, and New Zealanders know we've got to pay off our debt. It enables us to keep our assets instead of privatising them, and it enables most New Zealanders actually to get a tax cut. That's what it's about. Now, you can pull figures out of anywhere and everywhere. John Key can't tell you how much he's going to get from flogging off the assets. Is it $5 billion? Is it $7 billion? The specifics of the numbers are less important than the principles and the ability to do what they will do. That is, get us out of debt.
The issue is, though, that John Key appears to be specific about the numbers, whereas you're trying to be honest here and say that they do kind of move around a little bit, but it sounds uncertain. It sounds like you don't have a full handle on the numbers themselves.
Well, the numbers that we've got are certain. Are set out very clearly in the publication that we've put out. The capital gains tax figures don't come from the Labor Party. They come from the Burl Economic Consultancy Group, which have come up with figures far more conservative than Treasury's. So they're reliable figures. They do show we've got a good form of revenue there that will pay for the costs of whatever Labor puts into place as set out in our policy, but most importantly will pay off the debt, keep the assets, and give most New Zealanders a tax break by giving households $1,000 more in their annual income because that's what the first $5,000 tax.
Because I'm not going to tell you how to run the campaign, Phil, but you're going to have to get that down into a pithy soundbite for the leaders' debates, because otherwise he's going to crucify you on those.
Well, it's the difference is Key wants to sell the assets, Goff wants to keep them. Key wants to give the tax cuts, keep the tax cuts focused on the most wealthy. That's why he gave himself $1,000 a week. I'm talking about giving people tax cuts of $1,000 a year per household, but we can do that paid for out of the capital gains tax, just like we can keep our assets and pay down our debt. That's pretty straightforward.
Phil, looking at the potential makeup of the government after Saturday, John Key came out and said last night on the news, he said a Labour government will include Winston Peters, Hone Harawira and Maturia Ture. What do you make of that comment? Is that slightly racist?
It kind of sounds like that, doesn't it, the way that he's put it? The only part of a coalition that Hone Harawira has ever been part of is one with John Key. I'm not about to go in with Don Brash. I'm not about to go in with Hone Harawira. But I'll do what Labour governments have always done in the past and successfully. After the election, if I'm in the position to do so, I will form a stable coalition that will be based on policies looking after the interests of all New Zealanders. We did it in 2002, 5 and in 1999, and we'll do it again. What we're hearing is scaremongering from somebody that wants to govern alone, and God knows what the hard right-wing agenda will be if he gets the opportunity to govern alone. That's what New Zealanders have got to think about.
And of course we may or may not know by the end of the week what was contained within those crazy old teapot tapes, but do you think he said something about having unbridled power?
Well, that's what I heard reported. I don't know the context, but clearly if he were to get a clear majority, that's what he'll have. Now, we saw enough broken promises, even with coalition partners that were supposedly there to restrain him. The broken promises about the GST, about KiwiSaver, about the Working for Families package, about capping, not cutting the public service. Give a national party absolute power, and they'll do what absolute power always does to people. They will misuse it. They'll do things that they never indicated to the public that they were intending to do.
One final issue I want to finish on here, some foreign affairs, because while we've been having this election campaign, Australia's been busy cozying up to Obama. He's been over there, and an announcement that they're going to be placing a whole lot more troops there, Marines, I think, in the north of Australia, and a big base up there. What do you make of those moves?
Oh, I think that's entirely up to Australia. I'd never presume to tell Australia who they should base on their soil or not on their soil. New Zealand has a friendly relationship with the United States. We work cooperatively with them. We even have some joint training exercises with them.
But can you see that would be something we'll do? Would we have American troops based here?
I doubt it, because there's no strategic reason for that to happen. We do, of course, have American service people here working in Operation Deep Freeze. I've never found that a problem. If the Coast Guard wanted to come here and work off our coast, I'd be equally happy about that.
Because hasn't John indicated in the past that, because he had some Marines here for some kind of parade, but he looks like he's heading that way. He would like to see a cozier relationship with the American military.
Well, I've got no problem with a cooperative relationship. All I say is that New Zealand always needs to maintain its independence, its sovereignty, to make its decisions independently and according to our values and our principles. Now, do I believe that the national government is capable of doing that? Not when I look at the past track record. John Key was one of the advocates for sending troops to Iraq. Labour, very sensibly, kept our troops out of Iraq.
No more talk about Afghanistan so far as since the first leaders' debate. Is that going to be an issue this week at all?
Oh no, our position's very clear on Afghanistan. Our SAS are fine soldiers, but it's time for them to come home. They'll come home and they'll not be redeployed there. As you'll recall, John Key equivocated about whether or not they'd keep going back to Afghanistan. Hey, we've been there 10 years. That's longer than the combined time we had in the First and Second World War. We're supporting a regime that is corrupt, a regime where if a woman complains about being raped, they charge her, the victim, with adultery. That's not what I want to see New Zealand lives lost for.
Final note before we let you go, Phil. Final note before we go to the polls on Saturday.
Well, the final thing is that this election is firstly about whether or not we sell our assets. Labor is committed to keeping New Zealand assets in the public sector New Zealand owned. We want our power companies, Air New Zealand, Kiwi Bank and all of the other assets to keep on returning their dividends to New Zealanders, and we want them to remain New Zealand owned. Secondly, we will address some of the key problems that people are worried about. The cost of living, by giving most households another $1,000 by the first $5,000 of income being tax-free. We want to make sure that every one of our kids gets a good start in life, not more than 200,000 children living in poverty. That's a moral and economic failure. And we want to make sure that the best form of welfare reform that you can bring in is to get people jobs. And that's what we'll be doing, getting people jobs and making sure that our teenagers have skill training opportunities.
Phil Goff, we really appreciate your time and best of luck this Saturday. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Wammo. It's a pleasure, mate.
Cheers.
Bye.
Leader of the Labour Party.